still remember the chipped formica of that diner's table, a pale orange with a dark ring where someone always left their coffee. We were there nearly every morning before work, a small group from the accounting department grabbing breakfast. It was about 6 years ago, shortly after I'd transferred to a new team, and we were trying to maintain some semblance of the old routine. It felt important to keep those connections, even if things were already shifting. The chipped formica was cold under my elbows. Another Tuesday, another pre-shift breakfast at the diner. I was going over the inventory list with Yolanda, trying to remember if we'd ordered enough sweetener for the coffee. Uwe was holding court about his weekend, something involving a fishing trip and a very large carp. Normal. Except the music box was back. I'd noticed it last week, sitting right there on the counter next to the sugar caddies. An ornate thing, dark wood, inlaid with mother of pearl. It felt wrong, like a Victorian relic in a place that hadn't been updated since the 1970s. I'd asked Norma, the owner, about it, and she just shrugged, said she thought Edison, the handyman, had brought it in. She said he told her his aunt passed away and needed to clear things out. He offered it to her, saying it didn't fit his place. But Edison hadn't been around in days, and it just didn't fit anywhere. Now it was playing a slow, tinkling melody. I hadn't even noticed it start. It wasn't loud, but it cut through Uwe's story about the carp, made the whole diner feel smaller. I mentioned it to Ruben. That music box is playing again. Weird, right? He glanced at it, then back at his eggs. Old thing. Probably just needs winding. Norma probably forgets. Ruben was always practical. I guess he was right. It was just an old music box. Probably a little creepy, but nothing more. Still, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, a strange feeling of being observed. Later that day, I got a connection request on PryceLink. Price. I hadn't spoken to him since he left the accounting team almost 1 year ago. A polite, awkward guy. His message read, "Hey, just updating my network. Thought of you when I saw a post about diner breakfasts. Remember those Tuesday mornings?" I accepted. Seemed harmless enough. A little persistent, maybe. But who doesn't like a friendly connection? The messages from Derek kept coming. Not constant, but present. Little things. Saw a great article on local breweries, thought of you. Or remember that awful coffee machine at the old office? Glad to be rid of that. It was unnerving, not the content, but the frequency. Like he was just checking in. Constantly. I started taking the long way home from the diner. Just a few extra turns, but it felt better. Less exposed. I told myself it was the fresh air. The February air wasn't fresh, though. It smelled like exhaust and salt. Then came the message about my dog. How's Buster doing? Still chasing squirrels? I hadn't mentioned Buster to Derek ever. We barely spoke at the office, and it was always about spreadsheets, not pets. I figured maybe he'd seen something on my social media. People share everything. Still, it felt specific. The next day, I noticed a car parked across from my building. Dark blue sedan, nothing remarkable, but it was there when I left for work, and it was still there when I got back. I started parking 1 block over. Then, yesterday, I went to Uwe's for lunch. I hadn't told Derek I was going to Uwe's. I hadn't told anyone. And there he was. Derek. Sitting at the counter, nursing a coffee. He looked up, smiled, and waved. "Small world," he said when I finally got to my table. "Didn't know you were a regular here." He must have been following me. But why? He was harmless, right? A little awkward, maybe overly eager to reconnect, but not this. I told myself it was a coincidence, a really strange, unsettling coincidence. He probably just happened to be in the neighborhood. People eat lunch, don't they? I finished my sandwich, feeling Uwe's eyes on me the whole time. He didn't say anything, just kept wiping down the counter, slow and deliberate, like he was waiting for something to happen. The chipped formica of the diner table felt cold under my forearm. I hadn't been back since seeing Derek, and now here was another message. It just popped up on my phone while I was waiting for my coffee. "Enjoying the blueberry pancakes? They're my favorite. There was no question mark, just stating it like he was here. I scanned the diner, but nothing. There was no blue sedan outside, which was odd. Usually it was always there. Maybe he'd finally gotten the message. Maybe he'd realized how creepy this was becoming. I felt a flicker of something that might have been relief, quickly smothered by the lingering unease. Then Alma, the waitress, came by. She refilled my coffee and handed me a small, folded piece of paper. "Someone left this for you a few minutes ago. They said it was urgent." My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. It was typed, not handwritten. "The 7:15 train is frequently delayed due to track work. Consider an alternate route. 7:15. That's the train I always took. Always." How could he? I looked up, and Alma was staring, not at me exactly, but at the door. And coming through the door was Pryce from accounting. He never came to this diner. He always ate at that awful sandwich place near the office. He was looking right at me, but his expression wasn't friendly. It was assessing. He walked past my table, heading toward the back, and bumped into a busboy, sending a tray of glasses crashing. Everyone jumped. It was a distraction. I knew it instantly. I grabbed my bag, threw down a handful of cash, and practically ran out of the diner. The blue sedan wasn't there. That didn't make it better, it made it worse. He wasn't relying on just seeing me anymore. He was coordinating Pryce. Why Pryce? Maybe Derek had been talking to everyone, building some kind of support network. A weird, pathetic attempt at what? Control? I started walking fast, heading toward the subway, trying to ignore the feeling that I was already too late. I went straight to Yusuf. He's in security at the office, ex-military, and always keeps things level-headed. I told him everything about Derek, the messages, and Pryce at the diner. I even showed him the screenshots. He listened and didn't interrupt, just kept his face neutral, which with Yusuf is usually good. It means he's processing, not dismissing. "And you think Derek is behind this?" he asked when I finished. "It's the only thing that makes sense. He always fixated on things, details. He used to ask me about my commute and what I did on weekends, just casual stuff. But now I trailed off. It sounded insane when I said it out loud." Yusuf ran a search on Pryce. He works in accounting. He has a clean record and has been with the company for 5 years. I don't see any connection to Derek. He paused, scrolling. Though Pryce did file a complaint against Derek 3 years ago. It was about harassment. It was dismissed due to a lack of evidence, apparently. That didn't fit. If Pryce had a problem with Derek, why would he help him? Unless Derek had gotten to Pryce somehow, threatened him. It was the only explanation, a domino effect of intimidation. "I'll alert building security," Yusuf said. "We will increase patrols and review the camera footage from the diner to see if we can get a license plate number on that sedan." He sounded reassuring, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. Later that day, I got another message. It wasn't through the platform this time. It was a text, just a single word. Olga. Olga is my grandmother, who lives in a nursing home 1 hour outside the city. How? I called the nursing home immediately. Everything was fine. Grandma was eating lunch and watching television. But the message felt different than the others, less like a threat and more like a demonstration. They weren't just watching me, they were watching everything. Yusuf had suggested I stay with him for a few nights. He lived further out, in Jersey City, a building with an actual doorman and cameras everywhere. I took him up on it. It felt safer. I barely slept, though. Every creak of the building, every siren, had me sitting bolt upright. The messages stopped after the text about Olga, which was worse than the rambling LinkedIn stuff. A silence that felt deliberate. I kept expecting a phone call, a face in the crowd. Nothing. I started going over everything again and again, trying to find a pattern, a connection. Derek, he'd always been a bit odd, overly eager to please, but harmless. He and Pryce had clashed over some project. I remembered. Pryce had been furious, said Derek had taken credit for his work. Maybe Pryce was behind this. A delayed act of revenge, somehow twisted to involve me? It felt small, petty, but the Olga thing that didn't fit. I went back to the office, Yusuf walking me to the subway. He kept looking around, scanning faces. He'd mentioned knowing people who could make things disappear. But I didn't want that. I didn't want anyone disappearing. I just wanted it to stop. I started refusing invitations, even casual things. Yolanda from accounting asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I made an excuse. Norma invited me to a book club meeting. I said I was busy. It felt isolating. I used to say yes to everything. Now I need to know who asked, and why. And how they knew I'd be at that diner, that Olga was in that nursing home. I was at the grocery store yesterday reaching for a can of tomatoes, and I saw him. Uwe, Derek's friend. He worked in IT. I think he just looked at me. Not a menacing look, just observant. He was with a woman, Ilse, I vaguely recognized from the Christmas party last year. They were both looking at the organic produce. I walked out without the tomatoes. I still don't know why. I've spent a long time trying to understand what happened, and honestly, I still don't. It wasn't a single event, more a slow unraveling of something that felt off. I keep replaying it in my head, searching for a turning point, a clear reason, but there just isn't one. It started with connecting with people over a shared hobby, and that's all it should have been. I'm telling you this now, not for a dramatic effect, but because the lack of explanation is part of what stayed with me. The smell of sawdust was good. Always was, especially in the mornings. I was finishing up a batch of small cedar boxes, the kind people like for jewelry or keepsakes, smoothing the last one, checking for splinters. That's when I noticed it. My collection of vintage hand drills, they hang on the wall, all different makes and ages. I arrange them by size, smallest to largest, or I thought I did, because this morning, the three smallest ones, the little brace drills, the kind with the funny T-shaped handles, they were reversed, like someone had deliberately put them in descending order instead of ascending. It's ridiculous, right? I definitely noticed that. I'm the one who spends hours polishing those things, making sure they're all lined up just so. But I'd had a late night working on a commission. Maybe I just hadn't registered it before. Bev had been over earlier in the week, admiring them. Maybe she'd moved them, trying to get a better look. She's always bumping into things. I just switched them back around. It took less than 1 minute. Honestly, it was probably me. Just a momentary lapse. I finished the boxes, packaged them up for shipping. Jules had texted, asking if I was still up for working on that clock mechanism together on Saturday. I texted back yes, said I was looking forward to it. It's funny, thinking back. After I fixed the drills, I distinctly remember checking the lock on the workshop door. Just a quick glance, but I did it, just to be sure. It clicked solid. I thought I was being sensible, thought I was just being thorough. The smell was the first thing. It wasn't strong, and not like something spilled, but different. Like someone had been in here smoking. I don't smoke. Nobody smokes in the workshop. I opened all the windows, even though it was chilly. Maybe it clung to my clothes from somewhere. I'd been at Bev's yesterday, and she still smokes those awful little clove cigarettes. It must be that. But then I noticed the sandpaper. I keep it stacked in those metal bins under the workbench, graded from coarse to fine. Someone had gone through it. They hadn't taken any, just ruffled it, like they'd been running their hands over it. It was unsettling. I use that sandpaper for detail work. I'm very particular about keeping it clean and flat. I started checking things. Not just looking, checking. The oil cans, lined up by viscosity. The chisels, laid out in silhouette on the foam. Even the dust collection system. Everything was right, but it felt wrong, like a stage set after the actors have left. I started taking the long way around the building when I went to get wood from the shed. It meant an extra 5 minutes walking past Stella's garden, but it kept the workshop in my line of sight. I told myself it was just good practice being aware of my surroundings. It wasn't the smoke anymore, it was a feeling. Yesterday, I'd left a half-finished birdhouse on the workbench. A simple thing, just cutting the roof pieces. This morning, one of the pieces was slightly off. Not much, maybe 1 millimeter, but I know how I cut it. I recut it, of course, but it bothered me. Jerome had mentioned wanting to learn basic joinery. Maybe he'd popped in while I was getting coffee and tried his hand at it. He's enthusiastic, but clumsy. That must be it. He probably didn't even realize he'd nudged it. I didn't go back in the workshop yesterday, just couldn't. Slept terribly, kept seeing the space where the shadow had been, right by the lathe. It wasn't a shadow of something though, it was just there, like a hole in the light. I told Bev I was feeling unwell, needed a day. She offered to come over, check on the place. I said no, I didn't want anyone poking around, finding. I don't even know what I thought they'd find. This morning I had to. The birdhouse commission is due next week. I went in slowly, the key sticking in the lock. Everything looked okay, too okay. I deliberately left a chisel on the bench, point facing up. I remembered that specifically. It was gone. Not put away, not knocked onto the floor. Gone. Then I smelled it. Wood smoke, faint, but definitely wood smoke. I don't use a stove in the workshop, never have. I checked the electrical panel, thinking maybe a wire had fried, but everything was normal. That's when I noticed the heat, coming from the back room where I store the lumber. I pushed open the door, and someone had been building a small fire right on top of my stack of cherry wood. Not a big fire, but enough to be smoking, charring the wood. Jules, maybe? He's always talking about rustic finishes burning wood for effect. He must have been trying to, I don't know, distress the lumber. It's stupid, wasteful, but... Then I heard a floorboard creak. Not near the door, deeper inside. Behind the lumber pile, I froze. And a voice, very quiet, almost a whisper, said, "Almost ready." I didn't recognize it. I didn't wait to find out whose voice it was. I just ran. Out the back door, across the yard, and straight to my house. I locked every door and window. And now I'm just sitting here, trying to breathe. The smell of smoke is still in my nostrils. I called Bev. She's a retired detective and lives just outside town. I figured if anyone could make sense of it, it was her. I told her everything. The voice, the smell, the things moved around in the workshop. I even mentioned the feeling, the sense of being watched for weeks. I left out the details about the online gaming though. That felt stupid, like admitting I'd invited this in somehow. She came over with 2 officers, young ones. They poked around the workshop, mostly looking at the door and windows for forced entry. Nothing. Bev was more thorough. She dusted for prints and took photos of the misplaced tools, the oddly sanded edge on the oak panel. She kept asking about Jerome. "He's still helping you with the garden? Did he have a key at any point?" I told her about him offering to fix the latch, about Jules mentioning seeing him near the workshop a few weeks ago. Bev just nodded, making notes. She found something under the workbench, a small, intricately carved wooden bird. It wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. "Interesting," she said, turning it over in her hands. "This is old, really old. Looks like boxwood. Someone with a lot of skill made this." She asked me to check my grandfather's things. He was a carpenter. I barely remember him. The officers left. Bev stayed sipping tea, looking around the house. It's probably just someone messing with you, trying to scare you. Maybe Jerome got the wrong end of the stick about something, or Jules is playing a prank. She didn't sound convinced. She said they'd run the bird through the database to see if it matched anything reported stolen. But I had a feeling it wouldn't. It felt like it had always been there, like it had been waiting. I think someone had been using the workshop for years, maybe decades, and I just hadn't noticed. That made a kind of horrible sense. Just a squatter, an old man hiding out. But why now? Why start messing with things now? Bev called 2 days later. The bird hadn't come up on any stolen art lists. Unsurprisingly, she sounded tired. She said Jerome hadn't found anything either, no disgruntled ex-employees, and no recent break-ins in the area that matched. He'd asked about Jules, of course. I told him what I'd told Bev, that Jules was just enthusiastic. A bit much, maybe, but harmless. I started leaving the workshop lights on all night. It felt stupid, but it felt safer. I'd glance at it from the kitchen window while I made coffee, a little beacon in the darkness. Then I noticed something else. Small things. A chisel moved a few inches on the workbench. A clamp loosened on a half-finished table leg. I'd swear I tightened that clamp. And the smell, that faint wood smoke smell. Not like a fire, just lingering. I thought it was mice, honestly. Or maybe the old house settling. It's a drafty place, always groaning and creaking. I set traps, cleaned up sawdust, and tried to ignore it. But then I found the drawings. They were tucked inside a stack of cherry boards, sketches of the workshop, not architectural renderings, just observations. The layout, the tools, me working? They weren't good drawings, kind of scratchy and obsessive, and one of them had a little bird perched on the roof of the workshop, exactly like the carved one. I erased my online gaming profile. Everything. Jules had been active in that community, always offering help and advice, always knowing things. It felt too coincidental. I blocked every account associated with the game. I even got a new phone number. It's funny how easily you start seeing patterns. Now I check the locks on hotel rooms twice every single time, not just the deadbolt, but the chain too. And I pull back the curtains, look around, just to be sure. I still don't know how long anyone had been watching. I check the neighborhood social media page compulsively now, several times a day. It wasn't a habit of mine before we moved here, but I find myself scanning for something. It started a few months after settling in, late summer of last year, and I can't shake the feeling of being overly aware of the people nearby. We just bought a little place on a quiet street, hoping for a slower pace of life, and for a while it felt like we'd found it. The hydrangeas were doing really well, which was a surprise. I'd almost given up on them after the move. They were blue, a proper blue, not that washed-out purple you get sometimes. I spent 1 hour deadheading them on Saturday morning, just enjoying the quiet. It was exactly what I wanted, you know? Quiet. Then I saw Silas. He lives 2 doors down and keeps to himself mostly. I'd seen him a few times walking his dog, a scruffy terrier mix, but this wasn't a walk. He was in his yard, facing the back of my garage, just standing, not doing anything, not gardening, not looking at the fence, just facing the blank wall. It was early, maybe 8 in the morning. I was kneeling in the flower bed, so I had a low angle. He was perfectly still, and the way the sun hit him, it was like he was outlined. It felt wrong. I blinked and he was still there. I waved, thinking maybe he hadn't noticed me. He didn't react, didn't even flicker an acknowledgement. I called out, "Morning, Silas." He slowly turned his head, not to look at me, exactly. More like his head rotated on his neck, and his eyes just happened to land in my general direction. No smile, no nod, just a look. It wasn't hostile, not exactly. It was empty. I figured he must have been wearing headphones, completely lost in something. People do that. It was probably something I'd overthink if I hadn't been staring directly at him for 30 seconds. I went back to the hydrangeas, trying to shake it off, but I kept glancing up. He was still there, facing the garage, still. The hydrangeas were getting leggy and needed a hard prune. I kept looking for Silas, but he wasn't out walking his little dog. It was unsettling when he wasn't there. I started taking the long way around the block when I walked to the mailbox. Just to avoid him, I guess. It felt ridiculous. On Tuesday, I was out back weeding the tomatoes, and I heard a sound, a distinct click, like a gate latching. But our fence doesn't have a latch. It's just boards, solid wood. I stood up, scanning the perimeter. Nothing. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a branch snapping, or the metal trellis on the side of the house. Then I noticed the birdhouse. The one Idris helped me put up last spring. It was rotated, not much, maybe 10 degrees, but it was facing almost directly at the kitchen window. It hadn't been like that yesterday. I'm positive. I always check on it to make sure the sparrows are okay. I went over and straightened it. Probably just the wind, I thought. It's been gusty. But I remembered the click. It didn't sound like wind. And why would the wind turn just the birdhouse? That evening, Lena called, talking about Bia's garden club meeting. She mentioned someone new had joined, a Zane, who kept asking about everyone's routines and what times they were usually home. She said he was intense. It didn't feel connected. It couldn't be. Just a weird coincidence. People are odd. But I found myself checking the locks twice that night, and I kept glancing at the birdhouse through the kitchen window, even with the curtains drawn. It felt like an eye watching. I didn't sleep much after that. Just kept replaying the image of the birdhouse, the way it seemed shifted. I told Denise about it over coffee the next morning. She said I was probably just tired, stressed with the garden and everything. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but I couldn't shake the feeling someone had been in the yard. Then I noticed my tools. The trowel, the pruning shears, they weren't where I'd left them by the shed. They were neatly arranged on the patio table, like someone had been tidying up, which is ridiculous. Who tidies up someone else's gardening tools? I started checking the security camera footage. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just the normal stuff. Me walking around, the mail carrier. Then around 3:17 a.m., a flicker. Just a quick flash of white, like someone shone a light right into the lens. It was so brief I almost dismissed it as a glitch. But then I slowed it down, frame by frame, and there for a single frame, a hand, pale, almost translucent, reaching across the camera. My heart hammered. I called the police, explained what I'd seen. They were polite but distant. They said they'd patrol the area more frequently. I didn't feel any better. Later that afternoon, I was weeding the rose bushes when I heard it, a scraping sound coming from the back of the house, like someone dragging something heavy across the concrete. I froze, trowel in hand. I crept around the side, expecting, I don't know, a burglar? But there was nothing. Just the back door, slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, calling out, "Hello?" The kitchen was empty, but the back window was unlocked, and on the counter, a single white feather, like the ones from Idris's ridiculous collection. He breeds those fancy showbirds. He must have gotten in and been startled. That had to be it, but why would he be in my kitchen at 3:17 a.m.? Why would he leave the window open, and why did I feel like I was being watched, even inside my own house? The feather, it kept circling in my mind. It wasn't just a feather, it was pristine. One of Idris's prize-winning feathers. I called him and left a message rambling about a break-in, a window, a feather. He didn't call back, which, okay, Idris isn't exactly known for his responsiveness, still. Daylight didn't make it better. It made it worse. The back door hadn't been forced. There was no splintered wood, and the lock worked perfectly. It was like someone had a key. I called the police. Officer Cal came. He was young, polite, and mostly seemed concerned about me being alone. He dusted for prints and found nothing usable. He checked the window and the lock. "Looks like someone knew what they were doing," he said, which wasn't helpful. I told him about the feather and about Idris. Cal made a note. Then he asked about Zane, the new neighbor. Someone had reported a minor dispute over a property line a few weeks back. I hadn't paid attention to any of that. I'd barely spoken to Zane, but Cal seemed to latch onto it. He fit the description someone gave us about a vehicle seen circling the block last week. I didn't mention the feeling of being watched. It sounded crazy. I told Lena everything when she came over. I needed to. She listened, offered tea, and kept saying it was probably just teenagers. But she also kept looking at her phone. After a while, she said she had to run an errand. Something about Bia needing help with her garden. She didn't seem fully present. Later, I found a small, smooth stone on my porch. It wasn't one of mine. It was dark gray, almost black, and it felt warm. I remembered Zane talking about his rock garden, how he collected stones from all over. He'd mentioned a specific dark gray stone he'd found in the mountains. It was probably nothing. Just a coincidence, but I started locking all the windows, even the ones upstairs. It felt safer for about 5 minutes. It's been years. I still check the locks, of course. Every window, even the tiny ones in the bathroom. It feels stupid admitting that, but I do. And I avoid Bia's garden. Not because of her. Exactly. It's just that's where it felt most concentrated. Everything. I haven't spoken to Zane in nearly 3 years. Not since I just stopped replying. He'd send long messages asking if I was okay. If the police had found anything, he was the only one who seemed genuinely concerned, now that I think about it. The others, Lena, Idris, they all just wanted me to move on, like it was a bad dream. I tried to piece it together back then. I was convinced it was Zane, some kind of twisted apology for the property line issue. He was intense about his garden, obsessive even. I thought he was trying to scare me, to make me sell. That made the most sense. It still feels like the most sensible explanation. I don't drive down Silas Road anymore, ever. It isn't even a detour. It adds 20 minutes. But I just can't. I remember seeing Nim's car parked near my house a couple of times before everything really started. She always waved, friendly enough I assumed she was visiting Abel. They lived nearby. It must have been a coincidence. The other day, I was cleaning out the garage and I found one. A small, smooth, dark gray stone, just like the one on my porch. It wasn't in a box or a bag. It was sitting on top of a stack of old newspapers. I hadn't put it there. I don't remember ever seeing it before. I threw it away, of course, but I keep looking for it.